We went too far. Humanity's reckoning. The scientist looked at his most outstanding achievement, a nuclear bomb so destructive that they don't need to be transported anywhere. If it blows up, it will annihilate the world. It will bring destruction for them and all their enemies. The ultimate deterrent, the ultimate peacemaker. The scientist waited for the final part of the bomb to arrive so it would be complete. He was alone in the chamber that held the bomb. The others didn't want to stay near that device. They told him they felt uneasy being there, and one even said he wouldn't feel at ease in his life if this device were to become operational. He didn't share their worries. It's just another device. His country has thousands of them, and each one can wipe out a city. If those devices are out there and they could have a good night's sleep, they will be able to sleep with the knowledge that this device exists. The door to the room opened, and he came to accept the final delivery, but instead, he was faced with a group of people, high-ranking generals, and the Secretary of State. He wasn't expecting such a prestigious group to appear at his doorstep unannounced. This wasn't a good sign. The Secretary of State greeted him, saying it was a pleasure to meet such a prestigious scientist as him, whose work had brought the country many strides forward. The generals behind them lacked the hypocrisy. They didn't smile. The Secretary of State walked carefully toward the huge device in the middle of the room. He came too close, but didn't send his hand to touch it. He just moved around silently. Then he took a few steps backward and said, "Such a great invention, such power, but unfortunately we have to dismantle it." The scientist was taken aback, as they were too close to finish such a wonder. Now they want to dismantle it? This doesn't make sense. He looked at the generals and said, "Do you agree with that? Do you know what level of power you will have when this device comes alive? You don't have to raise any weapons in anger anymore." The generals looked at each other in silence, avoiding eye contact. The Secretary of State looked at him and said, "Doesn't this monstrosity raise any concern in your heart?" The scientist said, "As much as 10,000 nukes you hold in reserve, actually no. It's just another device you agreed I built, like all the other devices I've built in the past. Why is this different?" He gave a pleading face to the generals. They were taking his baby from him, and they didn't even say a word of rejection. The Secretary of State came closer and looked at the man in the eyes, saying, "Esteemed scientist, so far we have had 32 broken arrow incidents in this country. 6 bombs we have lost and never recovered." Then he gave the device in the middle of the room a look and said, "Think, what if something happens to this device? There is no going back for humanity. We went so far in this folly." He looked the scientist in the eyes, and his eyes had only fear. Too far. One general made a move forward and said, "Even the Soviets agree with us. We have both tapped a potential of destruction beyond any imagination, and they will de-escalate if we do." The scientist felt fear for the first time, and they were pulling the rag from under his feet. He said, "Wait, if they have such a device, wouldn't you like to have the same for assurance?" Another general said, "It doesn't matter, and they may have one. However, they are so afraid that they also want to de-escalate the situation." The secretary said, "We went so far, I can't sleep at night. We've been holding each other from the neck so that any wrong move would mean the end of humanity." He pointed at the device in the middle of the room and said, "This is a symbol of all that went wrong, and we need to get rid of it." The Secretary of State proclaimed, "This is an order, and better this second." The scientist didn't understand. He figured they wanted to disassemble it and store it in a room, like many devices that have no future now, but will someday be retrieved. But to his horror, the generals took out hammers and stormed the device, breaking it into smithereens with such viciousness that it scared him. When they were done, guards rushed inside the room and collected every piece of paper, taking them away. 2 guards came forward and looked at the scientist intently. The Secretary of State said, "We appreciate all your efforts, esteemed scientist, But what you hold in your head is far too dangerous. You will live your days in lavishness and richness, but we need to keep you away for the good of everybody. The two guards surrounded the scientist and took him out of the lab. They drove him for hours upon hours. Then they parked in a remote yet beautiful mansion. Some attendants waited for him and did his bidding, but he was refused permission to leave alone anywhere. The scientist couldn't believe what happened. He was the head of the most excellent scientific program. Now he is a home prisoner. The world has forgotten about him and left him to fend for himself. He had the time to think, and he concluded that they were right. In his small lab, he couldn't see the horrors he could inflict on humanity. So he resigned, knowing that it was all for the best. Time moved, and the scientist watched the world from the small screen of his white and black TV. Time brought about a lot of change. The TV grew bigger, slimmer, and gained colors. But the world he was watching on TV wasn't progressing. It was going crazy. War was erupting everywhere for odd reasons, and they were spreading slowly everywhere. One day, he heard a knock on his door. When he opened it, two guards were standing. One said, "Esteemed scientist, your knowledge is needed now more than ever. This country calls you to the line of duty." The scientist felt horror for the first time in many years, for humans have forgotten the lessons of the past. What do you think? Please share it in the comment section below. Subscribe for more. Yours, the Counselor, SFTG.